Ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here today. I would like to welcome everybody to the November 17th, 2020 School Board Work Session this afternoon. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Byrd if you would lead us through our items today.
Thank you, and welcome back, everyone. And we will begin with our first item that we have for you, which will be our policy updates. And Ms. Dodge is coming forward to bring those policy updates for you from Neola.
Good afternoon, everybody. I see that we've decided to start out with the most exciting thing on the agenda today, which is policy updates. So there are 4 updates for you today. They are all updates that have been recommended by Neola. I hope I'm not overly speaking into this. The first one is expenditures. It clarifies the procedure which must be undertaken when the board wishes to exceed your budgeted amount on anything, and then it addresses spending limitations in the law when we are in a state of when emergency financial conditions apply, and those spending limitations are regarding out-of-state travel and cell phones. The second item is internal accounts. That's been updated to clarify and outline the requirements. And basically, our previous policy just said we're going to refer to the manual, and what we've done here is taken the rule and just kind of summarized it in the policy, so it's more of an explanation for the average person who would be reading the policy. The technology policy is updated to remove references to the old digital classrooms plans. And then it aligns with that social media policy I've been teasing you guys about for months, and talks about the use of district platforms and websites using technology. And then the last item is the access to district technology from personal wireless communication devices, or PCDs as they call them in the policy. And what we've done is just talk about when you can use your personal device to access what. And then we've taken language from last time we deleted a policy, and part of that, it was the cell phone allowance policy. We deleted that, and we took the language in that was about using your personal cell device, and we've placed it into this policy.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding the 4 policies being brought forth today? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Dodge. And Ms. Dodge actually has the next item coming before you, and that's the legislative platform form for 2021. If you don't mind, would you go ahead and proceed with that platform, please?
The second most exciting thing on today's agenda is our upcoming legislative platform. We have followed last year's format where we had statewide priorities and local priorities. And so the statewide priorities, do you want me to go over everything, or do you want to just ask any questions that you may have? Go ahead and go over it.
Yes, if you would go through them, because we do have a new participant with us today, so make sure that he's well versed on it.
Okay, so the first item is discontinue rolling back the required local effort, which is the RLE. That is the millage that the state sets on behalf of the school board, and it has the past few years been rolled back a little bit every year. And so we've lost potential funding, and this being the budget year that it's going to be this year, we think this would be the year not to do that. And then the second item is about being able to continue our e-learning for students in the second semester. That is a choice option that many families in Polk are utilizing right now, and we'd like to be able to be fully funded to continue that option for our families. And then if we could be level funded for this year, that would help out the district tremendously. The last statewide, or no, it's not the last one. So the third statewide issue is our accountability system. Right now the department is proposing using prior year learning gains for developing school grades, and there are a variety of challenges surrounding that, including the fact that districts all over the state have not been having the same kind of learning year, and students all over the state have not. And so what we are asking is that We, of course, need to go forward with the FSA this year, but we need to use that data as a baseline year for our students to inform instruction, see where our students are based on what's been happening for the past 8 months, and then not calculate district or school grades or BAM scores for our teachers based on that data. And then the final category is also about protecting funding for our teacher salary allocation to make sure that the raises that we're giving our teachers are that minimum salary that we're trying to get to is protected, and making sure that in the future we can build on that. So the second half of the legislative priorities are local issues. The first one is that all-important funding compression allocation that we've had for the past 3 years. That's specific funding for districts that receive an allocation that is below the statewide average, and that helps us out tremendously every year. It doesn't get us to the statewide average, but it gets us towards the statewide average. The second item is becoming a perennial item, but it's still very important to our staff and our teachers, and that is making sure that our BAM score calculations are to us by the end of July every year, so that when they do start calculating those again, we can make informed moves among our schools before students, so that it doesn't impact students and families. The third item is providing incentives for state universities to offer bachelor degrees in elementary and secondary education. This is a new item because of what is happening with the College of Education of USF. We went through lots of iterations of what should we do legislatively, what can we do legislatively, and we believe that an incentive for those universities to keep those programs and make sure that we have teachers in the future would be a good way to go. The final item on the local priorities is to provide authorization for all state colleges to offer bachelor's degrees in elementary and secondary education. And that, again, is many of our state colleges have elementary, but they don't have secondary. It has to be, each college has to go and be approved to offer these programs if it's a bachelor degree. And so if each of our state colleges was able to offer that blanket, then some of these changes that are being made wouldn't be as big of a deal. So do we have any questions?
Thank you. Ms. Miller?
I just have a question. I hate this thing. When you talk about providing incentives, are there proposed incentives? Because that would be the first question, and what are we asking for? Is it monetary incentives for these teachers? Is it, like, what are the
So the
proposed
incentives wouldn't be for the teachers, they would be for the universities to keep the program. So monetary, whatever it takes.
Okay.
You know, I don't want to pigeonhole us into one option. I think that we should keep our options open, but I think that our overall thought on it is, if we offer incentives instead of demanding that
Right.
they keep these programs, that's probably the best way to move forward.
So the universities haven't proposed what the incentives that would help keep those programs open?
No,
Okay, thank you.
not to my knowledge. They may have,
And
and I just wasn't there for it.
I want to make sure this was one of the ones I did want to make sure we include on, as well as item number 4 under our priorities. And mainly because when you look at USF, they were actually closing down their College of Ed program, which that College of Ed program is the largest local public college we have that feeds into us as well as the other districts. That's going to cause a major, major roadblock for us. We're already having a shortage, and this is really going to just hamper all of us. So one of the reasons we're talking about incentives, and we're actually in conversation with USF now more so. But when you're talking about incentives, nothing just actually always monetary. Right now, we're looking at how do we build a pipeline from the districts to USF back to the districts? How are we keeping our, people that they're graduating right here in our own neck of the woods? So it's those things that we're doing. We're doing some of that work right now at Polk State College, but we want to look at how do we help this program survive and all these other colleges survive when you talk about the College of Ed. Because the College of Ed, from when I graduated, you could graduate with a College of Ed of 200, and now you're probably not seeing that, maybe half of that if you're seeing half. And so that's one of the things we're looking at, we're in conversation of, but it's really, if we don't support those universities and get them to make sure they keep those programs vital, it's going to really hurt all of us in the K-12 sector, is what's going to happen. The fourth item that kind of piggybacks to that, and if the board doesn't mind, I'm going to take a point of privilege to go into item 4 on that one. When you're looking at the state colleges offering bachelors, we have the one with Polk State College, that's for our elementary education, where you're seeing the gap is in secondary. And to have them to offer secondary programs that they can graduate with a bachelor's will also help. So again, we got to stop making excuses of a teacher shortage. We got to start trying to find solutions. And this is one of the things that we want to put forward and find a solution. How do we help our colleges, and how do we help move forward? I'm glad for the conversation we're going to start having more so at USF now. I'm grateful for the work at Polk State. Just want to see if we can help them to enhance what we do and then make sure we get our kids into that program. Also, if you look at statewide priorities, number 3 is something that we're really looking at. Board, if you remember, I spoke to you about that. If there has to be some type of assessment, we don't mind taking an assessment to see where our children are. The issue is we don't want really the accountability hanging over their heads, not just the kids, but the teachers. Because kids are in and out, teachers are in and out. As you know, we're shutting down, we're starting up, and we don't know what's going to happen after the break. But we do need to know where children are, so when teachers have them in their classroom instructionally, they know where to plan and how to plan for a kid that might be missing instruction. So that's something that we're putting on, and I believe it's going statewide. Now, we're all asking for that so that we can make sure that we get assessments, but those assessments are not used against teachers, students, districts at all. So that's one of the things we're pushing. So thank you for allowing me to take a point of privilege on those 3 items. And I think I saw Ms. Reynolds' hand next, and then Ms. Cunningham.
Yes. I have a few things. First, thank you for putting this together. I did want to bring up that FSBA's platform was sent to everyone Monday morning around, looks like at 11:14 a.m. I also just forwarded to Susan to see if she would share, so it'll be at the top of your inbox. But most of the statewide priorities, I'm assuming that's where you pulled them from because they sound very familiar. Number 3 was overwhelmingly the number 1 priority for FSBA. I think of the districts on our legislative call, there was only 1 that did not put that as their first priority as far as holding harmless with FSA scores for this year. I have one question on that, which I'm not sure if is a Wendy or a Wes question, but for them to use the priors, would they have to change statute to be able to do that?
Yes, current statute says you have to use the previous year's data. And so they, in their May accountability webinar that they had, they said that they intended to take that to the legislature and ask permission to use prior year.
Okay, so as of right now, they would not be able to do that unless legislature changes the policy.
Correct.
Okay. For number 2, in order to allow family school choice, continue to allow full funding for district e-learning and provide level funding. The level funding for next year, I think, is huge, especially, we don't know where all of our children are or the influx of children, where they might be and when they might be coming back. But with session not starting until March this year, will it be too late for the full funding for district e-learning? Because that decision has to be made essentially in the next, 45 days, right?
Yes. It could come up during any sort of special
Again.
session
Okay.
regarding the budget.
Okay, I don't have a problem with having it on there. I just wasn't sure if, by the time we get to legislature, if,
Right.
I'm assuming we'll adjust based on what happens in the next, hopefully, couple weeks, but
Right.
before December 31st. And those were my only questions, but thank you again for putting this together.
Sure.
Ms. Cunningham, Ms. Fields, then Ms. Fortney.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Having worked with this for years, I always find it very beneficial, if it's possible, to create a 1-page instead of 2, because sometimes they get lost in translation when you go up and talk to folks. So my thought was, and I know you can move it up based on the spacing, but my thought was on the PCPS targeted priorities, number 3 and number 4, when I first read them, I thought it was the same thing twice. So is there any way to provide incentives and authorization for all state colleges and universities to offer blah, blah, blah? Because it's pretty much the same, and I understand you're trying to make a difference, so I'm just bringing that up. I know it's a board decision, but I would think if we could do that and then perhaps have it to one page, it might make dissemination easier and talking points easier.
Yes, ma'am. I have every intention of making sure that this is one page.
One page, okay, all right.
It's on letterhead right now, which
I
I
understand.
can't modify
It's
the
okay.
margins, but I know
Okay.
that our folks in public relations will help me make it pretty on
Do you
one
think
page.
there's merit in putting 3 and 4 together?
Yes, if
Just-
that's okay with
is-
everybody else, then that's.
Because really, there's just one word to add, and I think we would have it covered.
Right,
Everybody
just
feel
make sure
okay?
one is state universities and the other one is colleges.
Yes,
Yes,
So let's
ma'am.
make sure we,
Yes.
we make sure we have that on there like that.
yes.
How do our platform align with the state? And it seems like it's pretty much in alignment. And the other question that I have, Ms. Wendy, we've been requesting, number one, for a long window of time, the rollback.
Mhm.
What is your sense that someone is listening to that request? Because I think that has been something that we've been dealing with since Paula Dockery was in Tallahassee. So, do you think anybody is listening to that, or do you not feel comfortable answering that? If you don't, you can a private conversation.
It depends on who the players are, but I think that there might be people in leadership positions this year who would be at least willing to listen to us about that issue. The actual rollback has only been around for, I want to say, 5 or 6 years. So,
I think it's further than that.
has it been?
Mm-hmm.
But,
It's been a minute.
I think it's, considering the times that we are in now, I think it's probably more relevant now than ever.
Thank you for that answer. And then I wanted to commend the superintendent for being in front of the issue with USF. And there are other school districts that's also working together hand in hand. I think the more school districts that can work towards this common goal, the likelihood that we'll be able to continue that partnership with USF as it relates to the education piece. So thank you, Superintendent Byrd.
Thank you, and I'll keep the board abreast. We do have a meeting with the interim, the interim provost this Friday. So I'll keep you all aware of what's going on with that information. Thank you. Ms. Fortney, then Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. When you go to print this, Wendy, do we print the statewide priorities as well? I can't remember. On our little booklet?
Yes, we have.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I picked up a copy and I couldn't remember. And then my question kind of goes with Ms. Fields. On number 2, did we actually get that last year? On our targeted, on the VAM only, coming from, or by July 31st, did that happen?
Bills were filed, it passed on one side and did not pass on the other, didn't end up in the big education bill. But
So do we remember when we got the VAM scores? Was it any earlier or?
we didn't get VAM scores this year.
Yeah, I meant like
The
before
last
that.
time we got them, it was after July 30th. I want to say it was
I just wanted to point
first
that out.
week of school.
And
or
it
the
created
Friday
chaos.
before the first week of school. The Friday before we started school on Monday.
I just wanted to make that public. Yes, thank you.
You're correct, Ms. Fortney, and that's one of the reasons I would actually encourage to keep that in the forefront so it does not slip off and it goes back. I mean, we're still not getting it earlier, but if we keep it on there, I think eventually, hopefully with the changes, maybe we can impress upon them. But it really puts us in a position as a district because we start our planning, in the spring and we're already moving about. So when you have to move people about on the cabin at such a late date, that really harms kids is what it does. So I would really encourage the board to keep that in the forefront.
It's near and dear to my heart, obviously.
Yes. Ms. Reynolds, then back to Ms. Miller.
Ms. Fortney, just to clarify too, Melanie Bell is who filed that last year, and she is committed to filing again for this session. Which getting the House bill is usually a little bit more difficult than getting the Senate because they're limited on how many they can file. But she is committed to doing that for this session. She's indicated to this point at least. So I think it will move forward as well this year.
Thank you. Ms. Miller?
Just have a question because Ms. Fields had a good point that we've been working on the millage rollback for a while. And I can't tell, I'm having technical difficulties. But I think, in speaking to the community last week and sharing, having someone from finance share the graph that shows that rollback, people were very interested in why that's happening. And I think we need to do, I don't know if we still have that page that lets us put our priorities on our district website once they're finalized. But having that graph alone, so people understand what it looks like and how long it's been happening, I think that would be effective for community input to our delegation.
I agree. That's the most shocking graphic I show. Yep.
Thank you. We will make sure that's placed on there. Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you for your advocacy in Tallahassee. You do a wonderful job. And I just want to share my thoughts. I appreciate the comments about number 3. I think that it's important, and the fact that FSBA has identified that as their top priority, I think that has to be our top priority as well. But I agree with Ms. Fields. I think we have to focus on number 1 as well, continue to focus on that. And here's a thought. I would offer it as a trade-off and say, look, we know we're going to see some funding cuts. Help us out a little bit, and here's how you can do it. Because if that is rolled back or taken off, as a legislative item or not, whatever we call it when we take it out of state law, eventually the funding is going to return. This will fall off the radar, and they'll never put the two together again. So I think that would be my approach in recommending how we can move forward with that. So thank you, Madam Chair.
So because you mentioned that number 3 should be our number 1 priority, would you like me to move that up to number 1 on the list?
I think so.
Okay. And then number 1 will become number 2.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. Once again, Ms. Dodge, thank you so much for, again, advocating for us and making sure we have all our priorities aligned, not only with FSBA, but with the other districts that are around us as well. We'll be greater in numbers and hopefully can move things forward. Board, the next item you have coming before you is, again, excitement. It's about the adoption of Davenport High School boundaries. And today we have coming Pam Luce. Is Ms. Luce here? Okay. Mr. Brown, and I know Mr. Keys, is he? He's on Zoom. He is under the weather, but he very much so wanted to be a part of this, as it's not only just been an excitement in that area, but it's one that's been a long time coming. So we want to welcome them, and they're going to go over the boundaries with you, and we're excited. And we also have the principal here, Mr. Duget. He's here as well.
All right, thank you, everyone, for allowing us to speak about this today. I think what I want to start off with is noting that we did a community meeting, and there were a lot of questions as it related to the programs that were going to be available at the new high school and the participation in those. But by and large, the community seemed to be in support of the recommendations we're making. So we'll go quickly through this slide presentation. As we all know, that the Davenport High School was being built to address the rapid growth in the northeast part of the county. And with that, the overcrowding of both Ridge Community High School and Haines City Senior High School. If we'll advance down to slide number 4. Just a couple more. So this kind of prefaces what I just spoke about. It is under construction to relieve the space needed for the growth in the northeast. Ridge Community Seniors currently at 127% of capacity, while Haines City Senior High is at 103% capacity. There are at both schools multiple portables in place, to kind of help with their overflow. The committee looked over 4 different options and unanimously decided that the option number 4 would be our recommendation because it best meets kind of our guidelines and parameters to do that, or when we're drawing these boundary lines. The idea is set forth is saying that we want to try to keep the initial enrollment at 75% or less, because again, if we go and pack the school right away, we're not allowing for the growth. The last that I spoke to some city officials, there were 42 developments currently active in that area. As you can see, by this map, where we've kind of drawn on it, doesn't show where the developments are, but there's quite a few that are going on. And so we, again, want to make sure that when we recommend these boundary lines, that we're allowing for future growth. So the option number 4, which we picked, would be initial enrollment of 1,754 students, or 74% of its capacity. And that will allow that buffer that we need for the continued growth. During that first year, which is the second part you see underneath there, where it says Davenport High School first year, seniors at Ridge Community and Haines City Senior will be allowed, or juniors going into the senior, to stay at their school and experience their senior year at the school they've been up to this point. I think that's a very good idea. Obviously, we don't want to take a student that's been at a high school for 3 years and say, oh, by the way, you're going to spend your last year at this new school away from potential friends and classmates and graduating. So that's a very big experience and a great time for those high school seniors. So during that first year, they will be allowed, or the first year that Davenport Senior High is open, they will be allowed, those students at Ridge Community and Haines City Senior, to stay in their schools. If we'll advance to the next one, you can kind of see what's happening there for the first year Ridge Community. So we're reducing that enrollment to 2,005 students after that first year, which is a big difference. If you notice, we were at over 120% capacity. This will drop the utilization rate to about 83% for that second year, which is that 2005 number, which is substantial. And the other good thing about that is that with that drop in utilization, all the portables should be removed from that campus unless they break ground with another 20 developments or so. That should hold true. The same thing going to Haines City High School. Again, with that first year, looks like we're going to drop to around 2347. Haines City Senior High is not going to see as much relief as Ridge Community High School. However, we are actively looking, and I say we, the district, and looking at property and then the area east of Haines City and east of Davenport, sort of in the Poinciana area, for potential sites for another high school to add additional relief, because it is a real problem. If you've been anywhere around the area, you will notice that in just Haines City, if you go to Haines City Senior High School, across the street on 30th Street, there are 2 developments literally across the street from the high school going up right now. So these issues are going to be with us for a while. And as you can see from this slide, with the developments ongoing there, you see them shaded in their different colors. 6,900 single family units and 6,200 multifamily units over the next 10 years adds an approximate 150 new high school students per year. So you can see with those numbers how we would reach capacity again at the new high school very quickly. Moving on to the next slide. The new school has capacity for 2,375 students. Again, it will provide relief for Ridge Community and Haines City Senior, and it's gonna do a lot in providing for the growth in that area. I will say that Mr. Duget has done a fabulous job up to this point, creating awareness. The community has been very actively involved. I'll share kind of a little statistic that I thought was amazing. We had also met together to decide on naming for the new high school, and there were over, I'm looking at my page now, over 4,000 participants engaged in helping to name the new high school. So the community involvement, the community interest in the new high school is great. Mr. Duget has done a great job connecting with those leaders in the community, and I think that it's going to be very well received. And we have labored hard over this and finding the best option to recommend. So we are recommending to the board option number 4 based on our studies and our review of those as a recommendation for the boundary. That's all I have.
First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Keys for making that presentation. He's always been there for me, and he always steps in and does a wonderful job. I would like to also thank the staff of the district. They have worked tirelessly and have done an excellent job. Can't find better people to do the work. I can only say, and I hate calling out people specifically, but the person seated to my left, Ms. Pam Luce, she's done an excellent job, keeps me informed. Matter of fact, called me this morning to make certain that I was going to be in the right place. She's always on point, so I want to personally and publicly thank her. Additionally, I want to welcome the new board member here, Mr. Allen, to the board. As you very well know, I don't come to meetings that frequently. I don't believe in attending a lot of meetings, but I believe in doing the best for our students. I want to say to all who are listening that we may not have done our very best, but as I stated at the community meeting, we are here to improve on what we have already done, and hopefully at the end of the day, we will have done the best for all of our students in Polk County. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Ms. Fields?
Mr. Brown, you all might have covered this in your presentation, but I'm just interested in knowing, I know there was a public hearing and input was provided by the community. What kind of response did you all have? How many people were in attendance?
Well, in attendance, we had approximately 30 or 40 people in the auditorium, but we also had it on Zoom, and there were questions asked of us while we were having the meeting. So I thought, based upon what limited knowledge that I have of how things function in this district, it was an excellent turnout.
And the response was positive
The
overall?
response was positive. I only heard one person who may have felt sort of negatively about what was going on, and I think it was basically a person because he wanted a few students pulled into the zone. Other than that, I have no concerns about where we're headed.
Well, thank you all for your hard work. This job is not an easy job, because no matter what you do, it's not going to appease everybody. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Ms. Cunningham, then Ms. Reynolds.
Thank you, and I personally wanted to thank Mr. Keys, Travis, thank you, and Mr. Brown for being there, and it was a great meeting, Ms. Luce, and all of staff that were present. I thought it was very well attended. I thought a lot of the questions were pointed. I think most of them were concerns, let me be honest, about if I'm in 11th grade, do I get to stay at my current high school, or if I'm zoned for the new high school, will I be asked to leave? And I think that came up both in Zoom and in person, and we kept answering that. Ms. Luce kind of facilitated the question and answer period, and I thought everybody's questions really were answered, and they understood what we were trying to accomplish, and I felt it really was a good public hearing with quite a bit of question and answer. So I know it took time out of y'all's schedules to be there as public citizens, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do that and to facilitate this meeting. I thought it really went well. And I think we left there that night thinking, okay, we're on board. There may be a few little other things that need to be taken care of by staff, but overall, I think we're on the right path. And Mr. Duget was awesome. because he was able, and he's hiding in the back here today. Yes, he is. But it was kind of neat because a lot of the families maybe had not taken the time to learn about what academies and things were going to be offered. And when those questions came, Mr. Duget was gracious enough to stand up and say, here, let me tell you what I know. Here's what we're offering. Here's how we're hoping to handle it as we move forward. So it was critical that Mr. Duget was in the audience to be able to answer some of the parents' questions. So just thank you to everybody. I thought the meeting went very well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you. Ms. Reynolds?
Thank you guys for being here today. I just want to make sure I understand the pink area, which is the new high school zone. Was all of that previously Ridge Community? Okay, so the only section, the pink was all previously Ridge Community, the goldenrod and the thick black outline, that's the Haines City that will be moving to Ridge Community? So those are the only two sections that are affecting students changing? Okay. I just wanted to make sure I had a clear understanding. And then my other question would be, when we talked about this before from a grand scheme, and this may be more of an Angela question, we had talked about redistricting that may need to occur in some of the other areas in the county and trying to do it all at once as opposed to pockets everywhere. Is there still a plan looking at other areas of the county?
I think I can start off and I'll let
Sorry.
Ms. Lewis jump in. Board members, again, this is one of the things, since we've been building schools, we have not redistricted. And I think we try to do some of that with Citrus Ridge, but as you can see, Citrus Ridge is steady growing. And even as we're building, we need to address the issues of rezoning and redistricting. My suggestion to the team and to the board is that instead of it doing piece by piece, because as you're doing it piece by piece, you're building somewhere else and you never address that area. We need to look at it as a whole and to start addressing it as a whole. And that would be something that I would put up in the priority very early, because you're steady building these schools and we already have the proposed layout. So you pretty much can get a good look at where you need to have the lines drawn, even from the proposed. So that would be my recommendation, is to do it sooner than later. If not, you're going to continue to have a lot of this overcrowding like this.
Right.
And if we wait till it's too late, then you're going to have to end up shifting whole communities all at once. So that's my recommendation, Ms. Luce. I know that's your field. If you want to kind of speak to it, I'll be gladly turning it over to you now.
No, ma'am, I think you covered that perfectly.
Is that something that we need to give direction on as a board, that we want to start looking at that? I was under the impression that it would all be coming together now from our last conversations on it about a year ago. I just am afraid, especially in some of our, like the Winter Haven area. I know, for example, Winter Haven's bursting at the seams and Lake Region has some room for growth.
Right.
So I don't know what the next procedure would be for us to move forward in that.
My recommendation would be let us get into the 21 school year,
Okay.
because one of the things that we're looking at as we're building these schools and with COVID, we need to see how everything kind of flushes out.
Okay.
My recommendation would be for this conversation to start in the summer. And I don't know how you guys feel, Angela, but I think that's how you're going to have to do it, because those schools are going to be built and open in 21. Then that next phase is coming right behind it. So hopefully we'll have an idea with COVID how it kind of plays out. But the conversation on my part, I would say have that start in the summer.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No questions. Just wanted to make a comment. Mr. Brown, thanks for your presentation. If we look at our budgetary items, we know that building a school is probably one of the highest in regards to pressure on our budget. So to look at the planning, the future thinking, it's quite affirming. One thing that really sticks out to me in regards to the Davenport School is the heavy emphasis on some of the academies that really fit well within the context of that space and where it's being built. So specifically, the Simulation Academy really sticks out to me as a well-placed academy, as we look at Orlando market being primarily one of the biggest simulation markets and actually in the United States. So to me, that just kudos to our staff and that visionary practice and planning. So, Mr. Brown, thanks for being here. Thank you, and thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Ms. Fields, did I see your hand as well?
Well, my hand was up, and then I kind of said wasn't anything essential to say, but I will say, if my memory serves me correctly, we've had conversation before about district-wide boundary assessments, and I thought we had someone from Jacksonville who had come in and started that process a couple of years ago. So I know that it's been on the radar screen. I don't know why it got dropped. I know that the board had given some sense of direction in doing that, so I think you're correct. It needs to wait. We need to wait until 2021 for several reasons.
And Ms. Fields, I can speak to that. That was prior to me, but I do remember the conversation. And they were here, and they were actually looking at just that Citrus Ridge area. And I think the conversation was to move into the next phase at going district-wide, but things happened, and that kind of went away. But I got faith in with Ms. Luce and Ms. Usher. They had someone, and we've had these discussions kind of off to the side when we really need to bring this back. But it needs to come up, and I agree with Mr. Keys and Mr. Brown. As I go up there in that northeast area, you go up there one day, it's an orange grove. You go the next day, it is flat land, and they're starting to build. So I get a headache because you never know. You've already planned something out, and then you have new developments, and I'm very excited to see that. But you're not only just seeing it now in the northeast area. Now you look at your Mulberry to County Line Road, that south area. You're starting to see the same thing. And when I drove it, I think a couple of weeks ago, I immediately called Ms. Townley and Ms. Usher and said, I'm very concerned about this area as well because there's another development coming up. Do we have a school in the plans? They do have it. I didn't want to have them to execute that. Again, we want to see what happens. But we do have properties that we have some idea where we need to have them. I'm just concerned with the redistricting. We have to do that because the more, we can keep building, but if we don't address the boundaries of where they're going, I think the same schools are going to be overcrowded. The new schools are going to be sitting there waiting for the kids to show up. So I think that's why I say I recommend we start that work this summer or no later than the fall. It's going to be, I do want to caution you, it's going to be some tedious work. It's going to be some hard work. And for the community, it's going to probably be some work that's going to involve feelings. And I would say everybody needs to leave the feelings at the door, and let's do the work of making sure that we accommodate our communities. Because when you start drawing boundary lines, we know everyone wants this school and we want our subdivision in that one. But that might not be the best place for where the schools are being built in the near future. So that's the way you have to think, what do we have proposed to be built out? So that's my caution to that, but I do say we need to make sure we have that on the radar. Again, I do believe they already have somebody identified for that work because they did some of that work for us already, and they did a great job at making sure they can look at how many kids a subdivision can actually have coming into that school. So they have some of that information ready to go. Sorry for the long-windedness there. Ms. Miller?
Is it possible to get a list of the land that we already own? Because I know for a while there were groves that we owned, that we maintained. I'm not sure what is available now or what's been purchased that's vacant.
Yes, we can get that to the board. We did a field trip a couple of years ago, and I was surprised, so you'll be surprised, but we will get that information to you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Again, I want to say, Mr. Brown, Mr. Keys, thank you so much, and I hope you get better soon.
Yeah, thank you. I'm the president of our Rotary Club here locally, and one of our members was exposed to COVID. So kind of as a precaution, I wanted to keep myself away from everybody else. Fortunately, I'm getting a test this afternoon, no symptoms, but I want to say as a closing point, if I could, that when we as the committee meet, first and foremost, we think about the safety of the students. And on this particular one, you know, Highway 27 was a hot topic, and not having those students cross 27 if they absolutely didn't need to. And kudos, I know it's been said, but again, to the wonderful staff for allowing, you know, getting transportation involved, letting us know where these students are coming from, what's the best routes. I think that as we've continued this committee and we're doing more of these studies, that we're getting used to analyzing the data, and I just couldn't say more about the support that we get as a committee in making these decisions. Everybody's been great.
Thank you, and thank you to the staff. You are awesome. Thank you all so much. And the next item is actually some more good news about construction going forward, and Ms. Townley, is the Mayor Hatch? Oh, there he is. I see you were hiding. As they're coming forward, again, we're talking about that in the Mulberry area where we're seeing growth as well. And we have a naming of our new elementary school that's going there, so I'm going to turn it over to the mayor and Ms. Townley.
All right, well, good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to come. Mr. Hatch served as our chair of our committee, and we were able to meet in person and via Zoom, similar to our attendance boundary committee, in order to make some recommendations and hear a little bit about the history. Did you want to share any part about that part?
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me come talk to you. We did meet a couple of times, and the overall emphasis from the get-go was that we named this school after its geographical location, which was Willow Oak School. And you know, I know there was a couple several years ago, even, you know, wanted it named after Ronnie Payne, for example, or Alfonso, Alfonso was the young policeman that was killed in Lakeland that was a Mulberry graduate, and Ronnie was a Marine that was killed in Afghanistan. Matter of fact, he was the first Marine killed in Afghanistan. And Georgie loved both of those guys. But I think Willow Oak School is probably the appropriate thing. While I have the mic, let me tell you one additional thing that's not related to the name, but in relation to what you were just talking about growth in the area. The big piece of land behind Kingsford Elementary has just been sold, and the man that owns it wants to build a big subdivision there. So that's something else to put in the back of your cap and think about while you're doing all this school preparation. But back to the naming of the school, that was the recommendation of the committee, and there really was no opposition to that from anyone that I heard, and I think Ms. Townley will agree with me on that, and
Yes,
Pam
sir.
also.
And we even put out, there was one other historical recommendation made from the committee, although overwhelmingly Willow Oak School was the choice, but Poley Bridge was also a one-room schoolhouse years ago. But when we put the survey out to the broader community, we had 1,929 responses, and 87% were for Willow Oak School, which was actually a school in the area, and Polk County Public School records date back to 1885 when the school was opened. And just as an interesting tidbit, the board generously agreed to increase the teacher salary for the 2 teachers that worked at the school in 1898 from $40 a month to $45 a month. So as we were delving into this work, some of the tidbits were quite interesting. So that is the recommendation from the committee. Mrs. Fortney is the board member for the area and submitted a letter as well. And so that is what we are bringing forward to you today.
Thank you. Ms. Fortney.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Mr. Hatch. I know it's probably odd for you to see me up here because I look like my sister so much, and probably brings back nightmares for you in Mulberry. But I wanted to thank that whole committee. In learning the history of that area was just, I'm a history buff, so that was really, really cool. Thank you so much for the service of everybody.
Thank you. Mr.
Any
Miller?
other questions?
I just had one, more of a suggestion. I know the people that had mentioned those 2 gentlemen, names were very passionate about having something, and we have schools that have some kind of memorial, and I don't know if that's something that the school could look at doing, whether it's a tree or a garden or something, a plaque somewhere, so they can be memorialized within the school.
Yeah, we did discuss that in the committee, is that not only those 2 local heroes, but there are other heroes as well that were brought up. And so there's in the front of the school with the way the structure lays, there's a nice promenade area, or even delving into some other of the history of the school, that the original Willow Oak School was built around a grove of willow oak trees. So perhaps even having trees donated in their name and honor to help beautify the school. So there was discussion around that, so thank you for bringing that up. Very important members of the community and many heartfelt discussions and just around those, not only those local heroes, but others as well.
I would add that there are several students that have passed away and teachers through the years that are memorialized there, either with a tree planted for them, or I know Ronnie Payne has a thing out in front of the school, and there are others that even graduated with me back in the 60s when I graduated, and their names are there at the high school. And speaking of the high school, I want to thank the board for building Mulberry a new high school too. I mean, that's well on its way. If you haven't been by there, I would encourage you to do so. Any others?
Any other questions? I think the mayor's trying to get out of here. So-
I have a city meeting, I'm sorry.
That's important. Well, thank you again, and I look forward to continue working with you. I'll see you soon out there.
Thank you, yes ma'am.
You're welcome.
Have a good day. Thank you, Michelle.
If you haven't driven that area, the one thing I did, I pulled over and I asked Michelle, I said, are they going to put a nice big oak tree out front with some Spanish moss hanging off of it? Because that's what I can visualize. So she said, yes, there'll be an oak tree. Ms. Townley also has the next item coming before you. She's going to bring, Diana's under the weather today as well. Ms. Taylor is. So she's going to bring item 5, which is our annual exception student policies and procedures. And I believe you have a single sheet executive summary. I believe you have it there. It's with yellow. It was on your table. If you do not have one, please let me know.
All right, so this is a little early. We typically would not bring this back to you all until next school year, but there were some changes made at the state level, mainly for Appendix G, which is the last item there on your summary list, and it is the district procedures during a declared state of an emergency. So we did have to add that piece to the SPMP for our students with disabilities. And while we had it open, we just thought the time was right to go in and update some other metrics that we have, specifically under Part 1 about restraints, and then Part 1, Section A7 about seclusion. So those are the elements there. They were highlighted within the larger 157-page document for you. But the main purpose of this update was to include our procedures, which are directly linked to our instructional continuity plan for our students with disabilities during this declared state of an emergency. So if there are any questions, yes, ma'am?
At one time, our SPMP was available on our website. I don't know that it is, if it still is. I think that's important for the community. And the only comment that I have based on this is our restraint and seclusion numbers are high compared to the state. And I get a lot of community input on that. And I get advocacy networks around the state reminding me where we fall in restraint and seclusion. So I just want to make that note that we need to, and I know we've implemented some procedures to reduce our restraint and seclusion, but I think the board members may need to understand what exactly restraint and seclusion looks like. And we need to work towards decreasing those numbers. We're right behind probably Orange County, which is the highest in the state, with a student population that's less. So it's important that we are implementing behavior and de-escalation techniques so we're not enforcing these kind of seclusion. The state of Georgia has none of this, and states around the country are moving away from restraint and seclusion. And so I think if we start thinking forward, we'll see a reduction, and it would help not only our students but our staff.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Townley. We really appreciate that. Thank you for bringing that forward for us.
Yes, ma'am.
Board members, you have Information items, are there any questions on any of the information items that are listed below 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10? Ms. Courtney?
The donation report, Superintendent Byrd, I couldn't help but notice Auburndale High School's getting a huge chunk of community support, and I want to thank Board Member Miller. I'm sure she's got something to do with that, but I have a lot of kids that go to Auburndale High that I taught at Stanball, and they're thrilled. And I want to thank all those people that have donated.
Great, yeah.
And I wish I had more and to do with that, but Auburndale is like no other. We were at the city commission meeting last night. It's like a school back in time when everybody's grandmother and anybody that went to that school turns out to support. So I think Ty's doing a great job over there, but I appreciate the community and what they're doing for that school.
Thank you both. Ms. Fields?
I know we've had conversation about this before, but in past years, we've had the Florida Annual Equity Update report as part of our regular work session agenda. There's a lot of valuable information that is included in this information. So in the future, I would request that we spend some time doing an overview of the data that's before us, please.
Thank you. It's taken, I'll make sure we note that, and we will. Thank you, Ms. Fields.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Wilson?
Well, I just have a question. I've noticed there are have been no discipline meetings for some time.
No, there has not been.
Could you comment on that?
We have not had any.
That's wonderful.
Yes. You know, and our teachers, it's a stressful time of the year, but our teachers and our students and administrators, everyone at the school site, they're doing their best to make sure, even though this is unprecedented times, they're doing whatever they can to make sure our students are learning. So, we can thank them. I can't take any credit for any of that. They're doing a great job out there doing these, uncertain times. So thanks for bringing that up.
Well, thank you.
Now, hopefully we don't have yeah, they say you just jinxed it. Don't jinx it.
I know, it's like those golfers, they say this individual hasn't missed a 2-foot putt in 20 years, and then they miss it, right?
You won't jinx it.
Or field goal.
Everything's great. Madam Chair, that concludes our part of the work session. I will now turn the remainder of the meeting over. I would like to also request an executive immediately following the meeting, executive session.
Immediately following our work session today?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
And where would you like to hold that?
We'll go right across the hall so that we can let our
Okay,
our other staff in here.
all right.
Thank you.
We'll do that. Okay, so the next item on our agenda, board members, is our review for the school board meeting tonight. So just kind of going down the list here. Does anyone have any questions from number 1 through number 15? Item 1 through item number 15. All right, seeing none. Let's look at items 16 through items 23. Items number 16 through items 23. Anyone have any questions, comments? Okay, next we go to our regular agenda, and we have 3 items there. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Wilson?
Madam Chair, were we previously including the recommendations for administrative personnel actions and non-instructional personnel actions in the consent agenda?
Yes, sir. It was on the consent agenda last night, and I found out this morning that it was pulled by someone.
Okay.
So here we are.
Okay,
That would be me.
very good. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I make a recommendation? I will ask for that if we're going to pull items, can we pull them the day before? And the only reason I'm asking board members, once we pull, we can't get staff ready to go if we're pulling a couple of hours before the meeting. And we didn't know it. We were made aware that it was pulled, so we had to reshift everything on your agenda to be correct as
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
voting on it.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Thank you. I just
Thank
wanted to
you.
make sure I bring that because we want to vote on the items in the correct manner.
Yes, Superintendent, it's helpful for the chair, whoever that is, going forward, as well as yourself. It's very difficult to make those changes a few hours before the meeting, and I think for those that were in person during these last 6, 7 months, I have requested that. So hopefully going forward, if you have an item that you want to pull, that is fine. That is your right as a board member. The only thing we ask is that you do it prior to the day of the meeting. That really helps everybody facilitate the agenda the day of.
Should that
So
be 24 hours ahead?
could you? Yeah, it, you know, like by 5 o'clock on Monday would be really great for a Tuesday meeting so that we can adjust accordingly, or noon, whatever you can do. It would be appreciated. Okay, anybody have any questions on those 3 items on the regular agenda? Okay, moving on to our public hearing, item 27 through item 30.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Miller?
I had a question, and I kind of hurried up and messaged Wendy Dodge. I was hoping she would still be here, just on the policy updates that she's giving. We had conversation, and she had emailed some material that was requested concerning one of the policy updates. And I reviewed the material, and I had a question. I still have a question about the wording of one of them, so I can do that during the public hearing, but if she's not here available now.
Or if you can perhaps email her now and let her know
yeah.
your concern, and hopefully she can get back to you. And
I've sent the email, so hopefully.
have you? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, because I don't see her in the audience, or I'd ask her to come up. Is that correct? Ms. Dodge
I don't
may
see
have-
her. I
Okay,
text
she
her,
may
but I
have
don't
already
see her.
left. Okay, so any other comments or questions, items 27 through 30? And I'm going to assume that we do not have a auditor's report today. Is that correct, Ms. Matthews? Okay, wonderful. All right, well, that concludes our agenda review. Our next item would be old business, and really don't have any today, or new business. And so at this point, I'll open it up to board member comments. How do we want to start? Ms. Fortney, go ahead, since you're there. Kind of go around the room, if that's okay.
I really just need to reiterate the numerous complaints that I receive daily about lack of district support for staff and students with mental health, students with disabilities, social workers, guidance counselors, etc. I get people reaching out to me that they feel like their administrators are spying on them. I mean, the climate at some schools is detrimental to the physical and emotional health of some of our staff. I beg that we somehow take a stand to keep offering e-learning, even though we know it's not as effective as face-to-face. Those people that are doing both, the negative impact on the staff, I just can't even begin. And I know everybody's supposed to buckle up and wear their big girl panties and everything else, but it is tough out there. I just often wonder how we keep as many people as we do. There's got to be a better plan. And I hope that we are planning to be proactive about keeping some of our ADA staff and students on e-learning through the second semester. As you all know, COVID numbers are up, positivity rates are up. I can't find another district that doesn't have a dashboard, and I don't understand why it's so hush-hush, because it's community spread, in my opinion. And I do want to thank all those boots on the ground that show up each and every day to work hard, because we know public schools just do it better. And my last beg is to at least work with our unions to pay our employees a living wage. I can't for the life of me understand how folks live on what they do, but they're valuable employees. They deserve better. They deserve compensation. And that means even if it's lowering some people's salaries at the six-figure level, will go a long way, and that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No comments.
Ms. Reynolds?
I'm passing out, this is for Polk Vision. I've had the opportunity to serve on the operating board for the past 2 years. And they are adjusting right now and pivoting a little bit in light of our current situation. So I just wanted to make sure that the board is aware, because there's a lot of their teams that interact with education. Most of their teams interact with education. So I just wanted to make sure if you hear anything about them eliminating teams or things like that, that you know that it's not permanent, and just kind of what the plan is there. I know that Mr. Wilson and Ms. Byrd also serve on the governing board, so if you have any questions, they can also help me in answering them. So it's specifically, the first page is what the structure has historically looked like. If you flip to the second page, the changes really focus most on education, quality of life, and infrastructure, and the teams related to that. So previously in education, we've had the attendance team, literacy, talent pipeline, school health, and that also includes our infrastructure as well. And so moving forward, for the time being at least, education will include talent pipeline, which has always been there, literacy, and smart communities. Smart communities has previously existed but had never really included our schools. And then we realized in March that technology is a really big deal, and we need to make sure that our students have access to technology. So that's how they kind of got linked into smart communities. Quality of life historically had 4 different committees, one of which was school health. They're, for the time being, transitioning to behavioral health and aligning hunger relief efforts. With behavioral health, they're doing a study, which actually was started well before the pandemic. It just kind of coincidentally right now is when they're doing their interviews. So they started their interviews about a month ago. I was interviewed 2 weeks ago, and one of the things that came up was how mental health is affecting our students, how substance abuse affects our students. So I made the request that we'll now have students that are interviewed, with permission of their parents, of course, but to see exactly how behavioral health is impacting our schools. I'm hopeful that if we can nip some of it in the bud in middle school and high school, that we can save ourselves a lot of heartache in the years to come. So that's kind of how that links into education. And then the last one would be infrastructure. So before we had smart communities and infrastructure and sidewalks. Again, we still have smart communities, but they have done a dotted line to put that under education. And then for infrastructure, they're including sidewalks and pedestrian and bicycle safety, because that kind of all goes together. Even though sidewalks and bicycle safety has not historically been under education, I think as a school district, we've probably been the biggest benefactor of it, because one of the first things they did was chart where sidewalks were in relation to schools. And we have, I believe they're on their 5th grant of getting sidewalks put in within 2 miles of our schools. So again, most of the things that they do tend to benefit education, at least in the grand scheme of things, if not directly. But so I just wanted to, as a getting out there in the community, I didn't want you to think our attendance committee or anything like that was ceasing. But obviously, there's some things that Pulled Vision needed to do to make sure they were aligned with the current issues of the world. So that's what the chart will look like moving forward. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them or direct you to Kim Long. She's going to try and come probably in the beginning of the new year to give us a little update of some of the things they're doing as well. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds, and I just want to thank you for your service. I know you've been on that group now for a couple years, and appreciate you helping out to always look out after our kids and our educational system. And also thank you to Mr. Wilson and Ms. Byrd, because it does take a village in these days, and particularly now during COVID. So thank you for that. Ms. Miller?
Thank you. I have 2 things, and I probably directed towards Wes to give a little more explanation. One of them I emailed him directly, but I think it would benefit the board to understand a little bit more about the item in his attorney's report where we approve an extension of the resolution regarding the temporary suspension of the school board policies during certain times of emergency impacting health, safety, and well-being of students, employees, volunteers, and community. I understood that would cease once the governor's orders have expired, but Wes, can you explain that again so we understand what that vote is?
Yes, ma'am. The resolution is language that was recommended to us from our policy consultant, Neola. It was designed to capture as much flexibility for the district as possible under the current state of emergency caused by COVID. So it was designed for that purpose. You already have in your policies language that is designed to give the superintendent considerable latitude in the event of an emergency. That was written for the purpose of hurricanes. So it's a little bit different. This resolution was specifically related to COVID. It has three main components. First, it suspends policies that are contrary to or would interfere with the implementation of mandates or directives from the Centers for Disease Control, the Florida Department of Education, the Florida Department of Health, and the executive orders of the governor, specifically during the COVID emergency. Second, it directs the superintendent to implement procedures and take actions necessary for the implementation of such mandates or directives, once again, from the Centers for Disease Control, from the Florida Department of Education, the Department of Health, or executive orders of the government, and requires the superintendent to advise the school board as necessary and appropriate on a twice-monthly basis by a virtual meeting during that time. So those were the three items that were in there. I think there was a little confusion because there is one of the executive orders that has not been renewed is the one that authorized agencies such as school boards, city commissions, county commissions, any agencies that were required to do business in the sunshine to meet virtually during this period. That order has expired, and I have not heard any suggestion that it might be renewed at any time or extended. Possible, but I have not heard it. But the state of emergency has not been lifted for other purposes. So as I mentioned to Ms. Miller, it's really sort of a belt and suspenders approach, but the purpose of the resolution was to make sure that the superintendent had maximum authority during the state of emergency, specifically to deal with COVID-related issues as we are directed to do by the CDC, the Department of Education, Department of Health, and the governor. That's why it's there. We did put language in it that says it would be brought to you at each board meeting for extension or for termination. So I will bring it back to you tonight. If you wish to keep it, you're certainly at liberty to do so. If you wish to terminate it, you can. Once again, I think that the impact of that is in the margins. There is a lot of overlap with your existing policy, but this one, the resolution is specifically geared toward direction that relates from the COVID, the public health emergency.
Well, my question actually is for Superintendent Byrd. Madam Superintendent, is this beneficial to you? Are you finding this something that is helpful to you?
To the board, actually, we already have that authority, as he's already outlined in there. And as things come up, if we have to have a meeting, we can call those meetings. So really, it's just another layer because we already have that within our policy, where some school districts did not have that, but we have done that. So that was kudos to the board for putting that in place currently.
Thank you.
So do you feel like, Neola, this was just a secondary approach to the districts who didn't already have policy?
Yes,
That was my
ma'am.
question from the very beginning.
It is tailored to the COVID crisis,
Okay.
whereas our policy language was developed specifically because we were aware that during hurricane season, Polk County frequently carries some of the responsibility for the state on its back because we are frequently called upon, even if a storm does not hit us directly, we're frequently called upon to open shelters and to make purchases and to contract with companies for a variety of purposes. The resolution was specifically tailored to COVID and geared toward mandates from the Department of Health and Education in regard to that. I'm not aware of a particular reason why it would be harmful to leave it in place until the COVID emergency is lifted officially. But I think that if there's concern about it having it out there, the superintendent still has significant authority to act, even if that resolution is not reapproved.
And I will say that I contacted Mr. Bridges a few weeks back and asked if it could be removed at this point in time, because usually these votes are pretty close in the yays and nays. It's not like it's an overwhelming support each time. And he said, well, the best thing to do is just to bring it to the board, and the first time it gets voted down, we can move forward without it, which I personally don't feel, talking to Superintendent Byrd, that this needs to continue, but that's a board vote. So that's the protocol that he explained to me. It needed to come before us until such time as it was voted down. So,
And if I may.
yes,
say something,
ma'am.
Please.
Yes, Ms. Fields.
When this resolution was presented months and months ago, I publicly said that I didn't support it because of the fact that we already had something in place that superseded that, and I didn't understand the value of bringing it back for every board meeting, and I asked Mr. Bridges about it as well, and that's why I have not supported it, and if it's up for a vote tonight, and I will not be voting in support of it tonight either. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Ms. Miller?
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification, because I was a little confused from the beginning, and we are so close to follow what Neola tells us that I thought there was some benefit to it, but thank you for explaining that and the superintendent giving input on how she feels about duplication. I had one other thing that's up, I would like to mention to the board, maybe for a work session to come up, or a retreat, or maybe even FSBA. I'm the one that's concerned with procedure and policy and best practice. And when we do our reorganization meetings, Sunshine makes it very difficult to talk about leadership. We have, everyone here on the board is quite capable. We have some seasoned board members who've done this for years. And other districts, as I found out, have complete work sessions on that. They have long-term discussions on what it looks like, so they can even approach someone to see if they want to, because Sunshine prohibits even asking, would you like to would you like to stay in that position? Would you like to look at the chair? What does it mean to you? What would the chair look like for the next upcoming year? We're in the middle of a crisis and a pandemic with the huge budget issues. Is it something that we want to create sustainability and keep what we have? Wes, I don't know. I don't know if we've talked about this. We've talked about a lot of things. But what is your input on what other districts are doing? Should we poll other districts? Because I would like to have that conversation. It's a very awkward time, the way the organization works, and I know it's been done that way for years, but other districts do it differently. So what is your input on that?
Yes, ma'am. I have not done detailed research on that. I've heard it said that the plural of anecdote is not data, but I'm not sure that's true. I think that if you get anecdotal information from enough sources and process that statistically, it becomes data. I can tell you anecdotally that this is a conversation that I see school board attorneys having year in and year out, including this week. There's always conversation about how do you do it, what's the best way to do it. And the one thing that I've observed is that each year, there's no conclusion to that. People will say, do you do A, B, or C? And everybody else will come back and say, well, no, we do F, G, or H. I think that the school board of Polk County has done it after the fashion that you've experienced, at least since I have been here. It was the way it was done when I got here in 1998. And typically, when it comes to the mechanics of the vote, typically nominations are accepted and then nominations are closed. Then there's a vote on the first candidate. If there's majority support, you have your president. If there's not, you move on to the second candidate. If there's majority support, you have your president. I saw something today that distressed me. My old friend and colleague, John Bowen, who was one of the most respected school board attorneys in the history of Florida, and had served in Orange County, Pinellas County, and retired in Manatee County. He likes to pop up and cause trouble from time to time. And one day I'll tell you the story. He used to sit in the office that his father sat in the office that our superintendent sat in when our district offices were the headquarters for the International Mineral and Chemical Company. So he's been around a while, but he pops up to make trouble, and he sometimes, and he popped up and said, yes, I recall a meeting at which we had to have over 50 votes before our board was able to agree on a chair. So most of the time it goes smoothly. In most districts it goes smoothly, and they do it a variety of different ways. But yes, you're right, it is entirely appropriate to have a conversation in a work session or at a retreat. You're right, the sunshine doesn't make it, does not make it impossible, it just stipulates where and how you have to do it. So you can have a conversation right now. Obviously, the reorganization has to take place today, so if you're going to have a conversation in public, right now would be the time to do it.
Right.
To inquire about willingness to serve and that sort of thing. I do not recall a circumstance in which a board member who was asked to serve has failed to step up or has declined for any reason. There may be reasons why board members would not wish to or be able to do that, but I don't recall one in Polk County.
And I think I'm mainly talking about, not the dynamics of the vote, I think that you can't really figure out a better way to
Sure.
do that. But in a retreat or in another setting, a work session and or some kind of organizational meeting to talk about not only the process of who would want to and how it would work, but what that role consists of and maybe some procedures that have came and gone and more of those kinds of conversations that you really can't have privately.
Sure.
And I think that's what the other boards have done. FSBA is who I called, and they said absolutely they're open work sessions about the position of the chair and vice chair and the role, and even with how we communicate as a board, all of that's kind of done at one time, and then it moves on. So it wouldn't be appropriate today, I don't think, but I think I would like to know if the consensus of the board to have that conversation in the next group setting, whether it's a retreat or put it onto a work session, because it's difficult to discuss,
Sure.
you know,
No,
what you
that
wanna
is an
see.
excellent idea and is certainly doable.
Madam Chair, I guess that's all I have, unless other
Okay.
people have input on what that would look like for them.
Okay, I'm not sure, Mr. Allen would be next for comments, but are you going to comment on Ms., go ahead, Ms. Reynolds.
Would that be something appropriate if we're doing master board to have during one of those meetings where FSBA could kind of facilitate the conversation?
That is typically included in master board training, but we could have a separate refresher anytime you like. I can help out with that. I'm sure that Andrea or one of her folks would be happy to. But anytime you like, we can put that on. But yes, it should be covered in the master board training, and it's also covered in when FSBA has their annual conferences and their breakouts for board members. They typically have that training available also.
I was going to say that, Ms. Miller, at the Florida School Board Association, they have an extensive work session for the board chair, but it's not required. And I think that if someone wants to serve in chair and they've not attended that training, that needs to be something they seriously consider to make sure that they understand what their role is and that they're one of 7.
No, I appreciate that, thank you.
I've been to it years ago, and if it's as outstanding now as it was then, they can tell you an awful lot of the things that you need to know.
I think it's just more of an annual conversation
Yes, ma'am.
that you couldn't have. The board training would be very impactful, but an annual conversation so that people can talk about, and maybe that's where we go back and look what other districts do, but an annual conversation before, not the day of the role and who wants to serve or who would serve or their goals in that, and what the board wants to see in communication, which would include our staff as well. I just think it would be helpful, because other than that, you're going on absolutely.
So perhaps a work session item in September or October each year,
I think that
so
would
that
be
we have
beneficial.
time to do it in the ramp up to reorganization.
I think so.
We can do that.
That would be a suggestion. Thank you.
Susan, you'll make sure we do that, right? Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Allen?
Actually, I just want to go For a point of conversation, going back to the resolution conversation, just so I'm a bit more informed on that vote for tonight. The resolution, would you say, although the statutes were written in regards to a hurricane situation, when I read through every statute, I'd just love to have your opinion. Do you feel like it covers everything? Because it's there, it's in writing. The previous statutes seem to cover everything that I'm seeing that's listed in section 1 through 5.
It is, I think it is very close. My reading on that is I certainly did not disagree when our policy consultant recommended adopting it, specifically because it is tailored precisely to the COVID crisis. And it has the additional, it specifically calls out guidance from the health department, from the Department of Education, so that we have Centers for Disease Control. So it specifically talks to those three things. Otherwise, our policy does not do that. But I think the existing policy does provide the superintendent with substantial authority to act in an emergency, and then subsequently bring it back to the school board for ratification if that's appropriate.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So in regards to comments, I'll save a few of my comments for later this evening, but I just wanted to give a shout out to Ms. Beth at Lakeland High Middle School for inviting me today for the great teach-in. It was an awesome experience. I'm going to hang out with Mr. Fales on Thursday in his classroom as well. So an opportunity for us to really focus in a bit on our teachers. Definitely can connect with Ms. Fortney's comment in regards to synchronous. I definitely have not been a fan of that, and I recognize the complexity of that on our teachers as well. I would circle back to say one of the last statements I left for the students in that classroom today is I told them that gaming was really good for their cognitive skills, and they really celebrated that. So, but we'll save that conversation for another day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Ms. Fields?
Mr. Wilson's hand is up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She's next in line, I think. I just had
Go ahead.
had a comment.
Okay. I just had one item. At our last work session, there was a discussion about the report that the lead group is working on, and Kate Wallace and I had told you all that I was meeting with her, and I did. And she is very much wanting to share it with the entire board. They are making some final revisions. And so once that is done, she wants to present, and so whoever is going to be the chair would be the person that she would need to coordinate that with. But I just want to let you all know that they are very much wanting to share the information to hopefully help us as we all work towards doing what is best for our children and for our school district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Yes, Mr. Wilson?
Well, I just have a question. Do we still have credit with FSBA for master board training, or did they send that money back? We still, so we can, because we didn't complete that before, right? Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a certified board member. I should have known that. Sorry, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, we'll take care of that and make sure going forward that we can schedule that into the new year. How's that? Ms. Susan, if you'd make a note of that, I would appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, anybody else have any comments for the good of the folks here? If not, I'm going to save my comments for the board meeting tonight. And once again, thank everybody. And the November 17th, 2020 school board work session is now adjourned.